presenting on the panel. A lot of great app insights from TiVo and from Movie TV. There's a lot more that they could have talked about as well when they were trying to respect schedules, but there was a lot of insight from both fronts. I'm sure that they'd be happy to talk more about any questions that you have for now. We are going to say a temporary goodbye to Ferris because he has to step out and present on a panel at eMetrics, but he will be back. Now we would like to welcome Dan Stone, who is product manager with focus on user-centric analysis and actionability on the Google Analytics team. So please welcome Dan.
All right, just give us 1 second here. How's everyone doing? Good. Good, it's getting kind of late in the afternoon, so I'll try to keep it short and tactical.
While Dan is setting up, just a note on the schedule. We do want to respect everyone's time as much as we'd like to stay with you here till 9 o'clock, and that's my MO sometimes. Speaking personally, we are going to wrap up right around 5:15, so we will do the Fireside Chat. So any questions that you have for any of us, any of the panelists, any of the speakers, and then after we wrap up that, we will have a special supplemental Google Analytics Jeopardy. We'd love for you to stay. If you have to go and feed your babies or anything like that, we understand.
Great, so thank you for the intro. I'm going to try to keep this under around 15 minutes, although there's a lot of content. As you mentioned, I am a product manager on Google Analytics. I work on some of our user-centric features. We've been making a lot of investments over the last year, and we're starting to really ramp things up on that. And I also work on some of our marketing integrations, like Remarketing. So real quick, before I get started, and this also helps me figure out what level of detail to kind of focus on, how many people in this room use user segmentation on a frequent basis? You can just raise your hands. Cool, so that's like 60%. And then how many of you use remarketing with Google Analytics? Nice. Okay, so I'd say more like 40%. Cool. So what I'm going to do today is kind of split this talk into 2 sections. The first is going through kind of like BuzzFeed style. What are the top 5 underutilized user-centric analysis techniques that I see when I'm interacting with a lot of Google Analytics users out there? And some of you are super advanced, and so if I mention anything that you're already doing, awesome, more power to you. Hopefully you'll see at least one thing today that will sort of pique your interest and make you think more. And then at the latter part of my talk in a couple minutes, I'm just going to go quickly through some of the sort of gotchas and drill downs around user segmentation and remarketing. Everyone with me? All right. So, number 5 in the countdown. Filling in your data gaps with custom events, dimensions, and data import. And I'm sure there have been a couple other mentions to this earlier throughout the day. Some of you are probably doing amazing things. This is an area where I find it's so important to be able to evaluate all of your kind of rich behavioral and demographic data in Google Analytics in context with the additional metadata that you have about your users. So bringing in things like your CRM data, your lifetime value, whether a user is likely to churn based on offline analysis that you're doing, and putting those into custom dimensions. And if you haven't used it already, with Universal Analytics coming out of beta this past year, we've been working on adding some more data import features. So you can start setting custom dimensions like a user ID and importing files of data associated with those individual user IDs. So there's all kinds of capabilities to allow you to associate more data with your users. Number 4, how many people are using audience demographics and interest reporting? Okay, how many of you know what this feature is? Okay, so it's a free feature, and it gives you access to the rich demographics and interest data from the Google Display Network. And as of about 2 months ago, we made this free and instantly activatable. So in other words, instead of having to change your tags, you can go into the UI and click a button and turn this on now, which is pretty awesome.
That came up in training a couple of times. I have to change that slide in my presentation. I thought something had changed.
Yeah.
So you don't have to make the track code change in or click the setting of GTM. You write the setting on. Okay.
If you're using GTM,
Why not?
why not?
Okay.
But now you can do it from within the UI. Yes.
So
Does this work for
I have
apps?
issues with these reports because there's very heavily sampled because there's just not enough data in there, or like a lot of times if you're trying to look for a segment, you don't get that data because it just says it's just not enough data to support it. And again, I'm not on a premiums account, so maybe that's probably right.
So I thought you were going to ask about apps, where it still does require a change in the SDK because it basically works through a different mechanism.
Okay.
So if you're basically looking at it in a property with a bunch of different apps coming in, then you might have the data only available for a small subset.
Well, no, this is like from the main site. I still don't get it, but
Okay.
offline.
Yeah, sure. So there are some limitations for this because it is directional. It does rely on the double-click cookie, and not everyone has third-party cookies enabled. And this is kind of a limitation with practically any third-party demographics intelligence product that you would use. So it is directional. On our Google Merchant store, we have about 60 to 70% coverage of cookies, so that could be a kind of a ballpark starting point.
Okay.
And this is also available in apps with an SDK update to collect the advertising identifier, or IDFA if it's on iOS. All right, number 3, cohort reporting. So some of you might be familiar with this reporting technique. It's basically the first user-centric, like truly user-centric report in Google Analytics that also doesn't have a fixed date range. And that's kind of one of the key differences with cohort analysis versus like normal fixed date range analysis, is that we're now starting to pivot our data based on the day that a user first showed up to our site or app. And what we launched this past year is only the beginning, so please stay tuned as we continue to add more features to allow you to pivot in really cool different ways. But even right now, you can start looking at how users are staying around and coming back over time based on when they first visited.
So day 0 is only new users, right? Not existing users.
Yes. And so if you look at the full table, you'll see on the very left, each row represents the day or week or month that users first came to your site or app. And then day 0, day 1, etc. is number of days after they first visited and how many of them are left. And you can also sort of display other metrics here, so you can say like how many users are purchasing over time, or what is the total dollars generated per week by user. Really cool stuff. All right, and then number 2, and you'll probably guess what number 1 is given where I'm going in the drill downs. So number 2 is drilling down to individual users with user segmentation. And this is a feature that is really powerful. It also, sort of with great power comes great responsibility, and it can trip people up sometimes. So I'm going to go into a couple examples in a moment. But you can see, here's our segmentation interface with the segment builder, and you can see 4 segments applied up top. And I've created a demographics segment that is returning users who are between 34 and 64. So using number 3, the audience demographics reporting, who are speaking a particular language, and I can use all kinds of regex if I want, who match an in-market segment, so they're interested in apparel. And then apply this to any report, and it'll follow me. And last but not least, being able to use and kind of build on these rich segment features in analytics by then creating remarketing lists and engaging your users and delivering to them relevant and useful messages across the Google Display Network. So if there are no burning questions, then I'm going to start going into these top two. All right. So let's do a little bit of kind of drill down on segmentation. And for some of you, you're probably like super expert on this. But even I sometimes have to like really think carefully to make sure that what I'm trying to do in segmentation is what's actually being done in GA. So kind of like a quick nav through the segmentation interface. There's a bunch of built-in segments. When you click the Add Segment button up top in practically any report, there's a bunch of segments like converters, direct traffic, certain traffic sources that are created and available for everyone. On the top left, this is an example, and the one that I'm sort of editing right now is an example of a custom segment that I've created. And there are 3 different sharing levels that I'll get into in just a moment. When I go into the segment builder, on the left, there's a bunch of sort of templates, like demographics, technology, behavior, data for session, traffic sources. If I have e-commerce set up, that displays there. These are sort of shortcuts to some of the commonly used dimensions and metrics that you might want to filter on. And then at the bottom, we have the advanced section, which are the conditions and sequences. This is where you can totally geek out in segmentation. And you can apply all of these together or just one set, and they all are ended together. And last but not least, up here, and hidden on the top right, is the sharing setting. And there are 3 sharing settings. There used to be only 2. One option is to share it with basically yourself, and you have access to it across all of the Google Analytics views that you have access to. Another option is to say, I only want to see this segment in the context of this view, because maybe it's like based on goals that are only set up in this view. And the third option is to say, I want to keep the segment only in this view, and also share it with anyone else that has collaborate access, or actually read access to this view.
Collaborate, that's,
Yes.
it's sometimes hard to understand what the purpose of the collaborate level is that, and there was a scenario that came up and I couldn't remember, and that was it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so to add more color, read access will allow you to see segments that other users have shared on the view and then collect them to reports. And if you have collaborate or greater access, then you can also edit those segments. Because the sort of spirit of collaborate is to allow users to sort of interact with objects that have, or annotations that have been created.
Otherwise, personal objects that would only be editable or viewable by the person who created them.
Yeah, it can get like sort of confusing. The way I've heard it described is for assets or for things that don't change the way that data is processed in Google Analytics, which is where you want edit access.
Right.
Have you heard another good way of?
No, I think you're right. I think yours is good.
Okay. So, without going into all of the permutations of segmentation, because we go way over time, sort of a lot over time, there's a couple different types of ways you can use segmentation. So behavioral, which is sort of based on what a user did, demographic, based on what the user looks like, what technologies they're using, sequence, so you can specify an order to things that happen, and then negation, so saying nothing or something never happened. And so to give you an example, and this is a complicated example because we don't have time to go into all kinds of ones, but just to give you a sense of how some of these things work together, here's a user-scoped sequence that says in step 1, they had a session with a duration of greater than 10 minutes. And then step 2, it's followed by transactions greater than 0. And so here's how it works, where we're basically saying when we create a user-scoped filter, we're evaluating and returning for users. Conversely, if you set sessions, then we only look for sessions where that matches. And so then we look for step 1 being true. And we see in the sessions, A is true for these 3 users. But we also say that step 2 must also be true after step 1, or in the same hit as step 1. So in the bottom 2 cases, you have step 2 never happened in the middle one. And on the bottom one, step 2 happened before step 1. So neither of those users are returned. But the user on the top had a ton of visits where A was followed by B. We then return, we say, this user matches, and we return all hits and all the sessions that's associated with that user. So it kind of takes a little while to grok the first time, but once you kind of like noodle through this, it starts being much easier to construct segments that you want. Okay, so that's it for segments. And in my last minute or two, I'm going to really quickly go through some remarketing. Nice. Glad you're excited.
Yeah.
So probably everyone here knows how remarketing works, but maybe for some of you who are a little less familiar, basically it's a way to re-engage with your users after they visit your site or app, and as they're browsing the web. And so the purpose is to basically get the user to come back and do what they probably didn't do when they were using your site or app in the first place. And the sad reality is that the vast majority of users in a particular session don't do what we really want them to. So we can sort of think of remarketing as an extension of all of the activity and effort we're putting in to get users to come to our site or app in the first place. So why use Google Analytics? I'm going to go through a couple of the rich signals in a second, but at a really high level, it's now super easy. So with one-click implementation, you can now check it in the app. You have it now integrated with your reporting. So you can use the same segments that you're used to in Google Analytics, and with 2 clicks, turn them into an audience list. And the third is the ease of having these super well integrated with the Google Display Network. So within seconds of creating your remarketing list, you can see it in AdWords. Or if you use DPM, you can also push it there. So some of the really powerful signals. We have too many dimensions and metrics in Google Analytics. But some of them are really, really powerful to be able to better segment your audience to re-engage with. So on-site behavior, customer location, engagement, high-value customers. You can use all of the custom dimensions and metrics that you're importing based on number 5 in our underutilized tactics. Any kind of event, referral source, sequences, sort of your imagination is the limit. And using universal analytics, this doesn't stop with only what happens on your site or app. So you can send events using measurement protocol based on stuff that happens totally offline, tied to a customer ID or a CID. So you could say, like, if a user visits your site, gets a quote, and then calls in and purchases through your call center, you could send an event back to Google Analytics and say, hey, I'd like to start remarketing to this user with my new customer materials. So because we don't have time to go through sort of everything, I just want to give you a sense of what are some of the best practices that we see when we're starting to get set up with remarketing across a lot of our clients. So step number 1 is kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised at how many people this trips up. Make sure that you're tagged across your entire site. Number 2 is being smart about your segmentation strategy. And commonly, one option is to go really, really broad, and this works well, but the next option is to start going narrower. And one way that customers often sort of shoot themselves in the foot is by over-segmenting. So we generally recommend segmenting based on behavioral stage or funnel stage, like where the customer is in the purchase cycle, and then additionally layering on demographic or customer segment dimensions. For example, two users that may be in the same purchase stage may behave totally differently if one is a leisure traveler and the other is a business traveler if you're an online travel agency. So you actually want to use different messaging for them.
And just quickly, could you remarket potentially on some of those custom dimensions that you spoke about earlier?
Yeah.
Okay, based on first-party data.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that's kind of how it's so powerful when you start bringing all this data into GA. You can now look at it, make decisions, and then take action.
And that would be outside of the UA instance, just with like the more traditional GA tag.
Yeah, like if you're using custom events or custom dimensions in the tag, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
So how does this work with your agency, right? So if your agency is the one who's managing their remarketing budget, like what is it? And if I turn it on, what does it do to, like how does that whole mechanic work?
Yeah, so sort of the permissions require that whoever is creating the remarketing list in Google Analytics must have edit access to that property.
Right.
So there's a couple different ways that we've seen people do it. Sometimes if you're sensitive about data access, you could have the agency tell you what lists they'd like to build, or you could say, here are the lists we'd like to
So
build.
once I build my list, then it's going to automatically start retargeting and start hitting their retargeting campaigns and propagating the banners that they're supposed to go up there, or can you put like specific banners or specific display ads attached to those remarketed lists?
You could do either. So by default, if you just create a new remarketing list and share it with like whatever AdWords account they're using, it's not going to by default change their existing remarketing campaigns. And that's by design, right? You might not want to change the behavior, but you can go in there and change the targeting of your existing remarketing campaigns, or just click the remarketing deep link from analytics and it'll take you in there and you can create a new remarketing campaign.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to hear from someone who's been using it and what are the success stories behind it. Thank you for connecting with me.
Okay.
I'll tell you a gotcha later.
Okay. All right, great.
Yeah, this is a really deep subject, so this is mainly to give you sort of like a primer on some of the common pitfalls that we see. So real quick, and this is my last slide, I promise, showing relevant content that is useful as well. So making sure that you have all display ad sizes and formats across devices. If you can set up dynamic remarketing, that tends to perform dramatically better than static. Making sure that you're removing restrictions like frequency capping if you haven't evaluated them and decided that you kind of want to deliberately add them. And then lastly, making sure that you're measuring, optimizing, and automating things. So using conversion optimizer with target CPA or ROAS, using your imported conversions or transactions from Google Analytics, and then automating your frequency caps.
Dan, when you say static versus dynamic remarketing, could you just clarify?
Yeah, that's industry jargon. So static remarketing is sort of like the remarketing to users with a fixed creative. So that's kind of like the normal remarketing, saying you went to my site, hey, come back and engage with me. Dynamic remarketing is where you say, I have 10,000 different products. I want to follow up with the products that people looked at. Or maybe I have 10,000 different content marketing campaigns, and I want to follow up with the content that people engaged with. I don't want to create a separate list for every single product or piece of content. I want to send that data dynamically and have Google populate the creative in real time that's basically personalized for each user. So that's really, really powerful, and we often see like 40% reductions in CPA when clients go from static to dynamic. And then the last is sort of a bonus, which is where you can use your remarketing as an additional prospecting technique. So you can use your audiences that you've created, and then they'll generate similar audiences, which is kind of a lookalike product in the Google Display Network. So you can create a list of your platinum customers and automatically generate a similar audience of people that look exactly like them, which can be a really, really powerful way to prospect. And so thank you for your attention. This I know was a whirlwind, but I hope all of you found